How's it going, folks? CR here, and I'm going to be responding to Chick Micken again. I'm going to be continuing on this discussion. All right, so Chick Micken, obviously, he's made his comments in response, posted me a few things on Pastebin, and Chick, I'm not ignoring you. I just haven't had time to get around to a video response. I did offer to speak to you on some sort of messenger or something like that, that would involve like real time, just to get more immediate feedback. When we talk issue to issue on that one, which I think would have been somewhat effective in finding out where exactly you're coming from on this one. But needless to say, you've put two Pastebins up there, had the chance to read them finally, so we'll start off with it. You said that you gave me a reason why MSM is owned by Jews. Well, it's not all owned by Jews, as you put it. In fact, while there are some Jewish owners of, or MSM, it's owned by more people than just Jews, as you have put that. With that being said, I gave you the simple solution to this too. When you get up into higher echelons of government, or like even corporations or businesses of that matter, when they're that large, they generally tend to attract people who are more in favor of pushing their own view of things onto the world, their own vision on to the rest of the world or the rest of the company, or so on and so forth. People who generally are not of that type of person to where they don't want to push a vision on the world generally don't make it in those positions. And this is why you're getting various media outlets pushing their own narrative, and instead of trying to objectively report things, they are doing so, they are more trying to indoctrinate people, to say the least. So, yeah, the more simple solution is that the people that get into those positions generally tend to be the ones that want their vision pushed out over the world. This is a good reason, to use the antitrust laws. It's also a good reason for people to not just believe willy-nilly everything they see or hear on MSN. You then go on to say they tell lies about Trump in order to get people to support a coup against Trump. This is kind of the funny thing, because in the other Pastebin you sent to me, this right here, you said that every Zionist in our government is a traitor and need to be hanged as far as you are concerned. You had in parentheses, yes, that includes Trump. So, which is it, Chick? Is Trump a Zionist that needs to be hanged? Or is he one of the people that the Zionists want to get a coup against? I mean, it can't be both. All right. Going on to the deleted comments and the hate speech algorithms. Well, you know what? I've already told you I don't agree with censorship. And when you start playing the whole identity politics game, this whole hate speech thing gets ammo, gets credence pushed to it. I think it's stupid. I don't think people should be supporting any laws that restrict our freedom of speech. you're not making a good case for it by simply going in and showing people reasons for them to distrust you, and we'll get into this as we go. You know, I've already told you I don't like the identity politics games that some Jewish people play. I don't like that any more than I like the identity politics that people in your camp are playing. I don't like the identity politics that Black Lives Matter is playing either. And we'll get into this, but I want to address the WMDs in Iraq. You keep telling me that there were no WMDs found in Iraq, and that everyone admits that now. Everyone. You know, I suppose I could post some links in either the description of the video or the comments that beg to differ with what you're saying. But, you know, I was in Iraq there in that time frame, and I've said I've had personal experiences, there that suggest that we found chemical weapons there. You should probably take a hint on that one instead of, just listening to MSN, which you say is owned by Jews and just lies constantly. I can't figure out how this is working in your mind. Yeah, the Israelis didn't like Saddam either. Yeah, I mean, that part is true. But even if Iraq, did have nukes, you could still probably say, well, is that a reason to invade them or to topple a government? Which, yeah, we didn't find any nuclear weapons there. But yeah, there are plenty of criticisms to invading Iraq and toppling the government there that don't involve the whole Saddam Hussein did not have any WMDs. He did. And in fact, when it came out that he did actually have chemical weapons, the people who were paying attention said, well, yeah, but he didn't have any new chemical weapons. And that part is true. So yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, Saddam Hussein still had his chemical weapons. He just didn't make any new ones. He also didn't get rid of the stockpiles he was supposed to get rid of. As for terror organizations, you said even if Iran does fund terrorist organizations, which they do, the U.S. has no foot to stand on. The U.S. has supported several non-state actors in its time, namely during the Cold War. Yes, we supported the Afghanis who were fighting against the Soviets in the 80s. We supported UNITA in Angola fighting against the Soviet-backed MPLA. We supported a lot of groups that were non-state actors that committed violence, in the name of fighting communism. Yes, that is true. And, we have a tendency to support non-state actors even today who are supposedly on our side. And I've been very critical of us doing this. I was critical of Libya while we were having the discussions on whether or not we should support that whole deal. Got in an argument with somebody who was more of one of the hawks, on this one. Yeah, and I told him, hey, well, do you know the people you're backing in Libya? Do you know what they're planning on doing? Egypt, likewise. oh, they're fighting for democracy was their only answer that person could give. I'm like, are you sure about that? So yeah, I was critical of that, critical of Syria, or us getting involved in Syria. We don't know who we're backing there. You bring up the white helmets, for example. Yeah, people aren't by any means good people. I don't agree with them either, and I think the people who were citing them were putting too much credence into what they were saying. The YPG, yes, I'm very well aware that the YPG is a communist organization, that wants an ethno-state for Kurds. Are you not starting to see that maybe this whole ethno-state thing is a bad idea, and that really the better option is a secular government that has a respect on basic individual liberties and treating people like individuals as opposed to collective groups? Yeah. Yep. Who did Iran fund? Iran funded Hezbollah. Iran's funded organizations that have attacked U.S. people, U.S. personnel, U.S. interests. Yeah, I'm in 100% agreement with you, though, that we probably should pull our soldiers out of the Middle East and focus more on protecting the U.S. But you don't exactly want to do that either. You've already told me that you want to send U.S. troops to presumably South and Central America to fight the cartels. Which, let's get into this part right here while we're on it. You said you've explained to me the situation in the Middle East. Hunting cartels down wouldn't be anything like that. Do you not understand warfare and how that works? It's going to have very similar results, dude. The cartels are going to fight just like the people we were fighting in the Middle East fought. They're going to use similar tactics. They're going, just period. He said at the very least we need to purge them from our own country. You know how you get the cartels' influence out of our own country, or their interest out of our own country? Legalize drugs. When people can get the substances here lawfully, and they can do it cheaper because it doesn't have to be smuggled up through a pipeline now, they're going to buy from the legitimate businesses, and that's going to cut the cartel's funding down quite a bit. It's a cheaper and more effective way of dealing with the cartels. The cartels can make a bunch of money. Let's presume this phone right here is a brick of cocaine. This brick of cocaine is, say, worth $1 million. If they can smuggle it up to the U.S. and sell it to the U.S., we cut the incentive for them to smuggle it up to the U.S. because nobody's buying it in the U.S. This brick of cocaine drops to the value of whatever they're going to be able to sell it for in their own country, and that's going to be not nearly the same as it would be the U.S. So that is the more simple solution to that. You talk about the tactics the cartels use are equivalent to war crimes. What do you think the tactics of groups like ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jaish Islam and all the other jihadist groups in the Middle East are. You think they were all kiddie fun time tactics? No, they use brutal tactics just the same as the cartels do. You know, so this premise that the cartels use brutal tactics, you know, could easily be applied to the Middle East too. If you go against them or something they don't approve of, they murder you and your family in a brutal ways. That happens in the Middle East too. We should have zero tolerance for that. I agree, we shouldn't tolerate that. However, you know, it's at the same time the problem of those individual countries that have the problems with the cartels to solve. We can't go and solve all the world's fucking problems, dude. If it was up to you, you would hang their corpses on the border and let that sink in that we aren't going to allow it. Okay, it's fine and all that, but you know, guess what? You're going to have a lot of complaints from people here saying that's pretty damn barbaric. And furthermore, you're going to hang their bodies up over the murders they committed over their drug business. I mean, why wouldn't we do that to murderers here then? Or people who commit heinous crimes here? I mean, we have our fair share of sickos here, you know. The problem is that people just aren't going to accept it. You know, you would have our border patrol stationed on the border at all times. Do you realize how big that area is that they would have to patrol? Yeah, it's not feasible to have patrols monitoring the border with 100% surveillance in every little area. I mean, the amount of people you would need, the amount of resources that would cost, unfortunately just isn't enough. So that's why we have our border patrol in key areas and key crossings, and there's a large segment of the border that it just doesn't make any sense to control because it is a large area of desert. And the fact of the matter is it's just too large for any patrols out there to be worth it, or any sustained patrols out there to be worth it. You know, in fact, that area usually kills a lot of people who are trying to cross it. And I know people don't want to get into those details, the very same people who are defending illegal immigration, you know, and the illegal border crossings, talk about how bad we are, and yet ignore how idiotic the people are who try to cross in that area. But that's a different story. You know? Shoot. You say you would also try to shoot anyone who tries to cross into this country illegally. Well, the problem with that is you actually have to see them doing it. You know? And furthermore, then you have to explain to everybody why you think it's a good idea just to shoot somebody simply for breaking a law. You say you would also fire every Mexican that works for our border patrol. You know, you could have saved yourself a lot of humiliation if you just gone to the Border Patrol's website, the Custom and Immigration's website, and just looked up the hiring requirements, you realize you do have to be a U.S. citizen in order to work for ICE or the Border Patrol or any of those other agencies, right? Are you talking about the Hispanics that work for those agencies? Those Hispanics that work for those agencies are U.S. citizens. They are Americans. And it has ever dawned on you that maybe they're working for those agencies because they themselves do not like the fact that people are coming into this country illegally? I mean, has it ever dawned on you that there is a good chunk of the Hispanic population, and actually more than just the Hispanic population, but there are also a lot of legal immigrants that are not very fond of people who are crossing the border illegally? I know, this might blow your mind. I mean, are you aware that we've had a Hispanic population in Texas ever since we declared our independence from Mexico and fought against Mexico? And even, by the way, before that, are you aware that there was a large Hispanic population fighting on our side against Mexico in our war for independence? These people considered themselves Texans, not Mexicans. So, yeah, they consider themselves Americans. And I know that fact also gets glossed over by the SJW crowd, but I can imagine you're in agreement with the SJW crowd on that one, though, too. Hispanics are not Americans. You are in agreement with the SJWs on this one. Congratulations. Before I get into this other portion here, actually I'm going to go into this. I don't have time to respond to you on the rest of this. You said something about blacks being Americans. No, they're not. In previous videos, in response to you, in fact, I put up a picture of at least, I think, 2 black soldiers that were killed fighting overseas. They signed up for the U.S. Army just as I did. They raised their hands, took the same oath that I did. Put their life on the line for their country just as I did. They're not Americans. They hate America now. Come on, dude. But you go on to say that they are their own nation. Hey, congratulations. You are 100% in agreement with the black separatists, it looks like. You are in agreement with all those other black SJWs who say that they're really Africans and that they're their own nation. You agree with BLM. Good job. I, on the other hand, don't. They even have their own national anthem. A lot of blacks would be shocked to hear that. A lot of blacks in this country consider themselves American, just like you or I will be shocked to hear that blacks have their own national anthem. And, that's because they don't. They fall under the American national anthem, and this black national anthem was just made up by our SJWs and our fucking black separatists. Blacks hate America and Americans. While there are some blacks that hate America and Americans, there are also whites that hate America and Americans too. But just simply saying that all black people are alike and they hate Americans and America and their own separate nation is just absolute nonsense, dude. I mean, and if you really want to test this theory out, fly to a few different places where there are black people. You know, don't identify yourself as an ethnic nationalist, obviously, but just ask them, hey, just out of curiosity, man. I mean, because I've been hearing a lot of people say that blacks are not Americans. Could you tell me if you're an American or not? And see what your answer is. I'm willing to bet a lot of them are going to look at you real funny and say, well, yeah, of course I'm an American. Africans are not capable of integrating. Okay, well, I mean, you're talking about people from different countries. Yeah, a lot of people from different countries are not capable of integrating into a country that they've moved to. When you've been brought up with one way of life, going to another country with another way of life, you know, yeah, it's a bit different. You know, you send me to Europe, I'm going to have a hard time integrating into a European country. In fact, I'm probably not. This is why we have immigration laws. But I'm presuming that you're not talking about Africans, you're talking about black Americans. Well, these black Americans have been here for generations. We've had blacks on this land before America even declared its own independence. You know, furthermore, those blacks who came here, most of them came here as slaves, as in it wasn't their choice. Now, I've gotten on to a few SJWs and a few of the reparations type crowd who want to pretend like the only people who have ever had slaves in their whole history of the planet have been white, and that, or it's somehow worse that whites had black slaves or something like that, you know. And I pointed out to them that, yeah, you know, however, this is not a white-only crime, you know. Those blacks were sold as slaves by other blacks, you know. And the fact of the matter is that them getting sold as slaves and coming here, while it wasn't a good thing, it is certainly no different than the blacks in Africa holding other black slaves in Africa. You know, the principle is still the same. It's still slavery. And on the other hand, the blacks that are here are American, and guess what, dude? They didn't choose, well, I should say their ancestors did not choose to come here. They were bought by people of European descent. Yet try to explain to me how this is a Jew's fault. And I am being a dick about that one because I think you're being a little bit disingenuous now with this portion right here. And you say it's evil to destroy nations with race mixing. I'm going to need evidence that race mixing actually destroys nations. But you'd say Latinos aren't Aztec or Spanish, they're fucking Mongols. I presume that's what you're talking about there, and you're incorrect on the fact that that destroyed the nation, the Aztec nation, anyway. If you actually go through and look at the history, the Spanish conquistadors went to modern day Mexico with the hopes of finding gold and making a bunch of money for themselves, or making a bunch of wealth for themselves. Now, the people they recruited to help them fight the Aztecs were neighboring tribes to the Aztecs who had a legitimate bone to pick with the Aztecs. So the situation is a little bit more complex than that. Eventually, Spain conquered most of South America and Central America. And then eventually, those colonies decided that they didn't want to be a part of Spain anymore, you know. And guess what? Prior to that, the U.S. declared its independence from the U.K. and, you know, cut their ties there. Which is the same thing that a lot of these South American and Central American countries did. If you've ever heard, looked into South American history, there's one name that comes out. Simon Bolivar. Simon Bolivar was responsible for leading the independence of a lot of countries in South America today from Spain. Simon Bolivar is on a lot of currencies in countries such as Colombia and Venezuela and Ecuador. What they did was really no different than what we did when we declared our independence from the British. And guess what? For the longest time, we didn't want to have anything to do with the British. There was a level of animosity there. We really didn't want to get involved in World War I, in part because we did not like the British still. We did not, you know, after we declared our independence from the British, we said, okay, yeah, it's done. We are no longer British. The ties we have to the British now come after World War I and World War II. Primarily after World War II. But it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that many of our ancestors came from the UK per se. It has more to do with the fact that we fought side by side in World War II and have certain values that we hold similarly, I should say. But, I mean, let's get back on to the Aztecs, the Latino portion. You say they're not Aztecs or Spanish. Well, yeah, they're descendants of both the races. And the fact that you're calling them fucking mongrels. Well, most people in the U.S., most white people in the U.S., are not 100% white. There usually is some sort of ancestry that they have where they have one of the local tribes somewhere in their bloodline. I have a great-great-grandmother who was fucking Choctaw. Now, I still, on any question they ask me about my race, yes, I still say I'm white. But that's aside the point. I have relatives where the mommy and daddy were two different races. Are my relatives that are mixed race, are they fucking mongrels to you, dude? Wait. Yeah. This whole idea that, mixed races simply destroy nations is nonsense, dude. The whole, majority of them hate our guts. I'm sorry, did you go around and talk to, oh, by the way, you go on to say they don't have a connection with Europeans, neither do Black Americans. Yeah, we don't have a connection with Europeans aside from the trade routes that we have with the Europeans and NATO, which I really wish we would just disband NATO and pull out of NATO and let the Europeans fend for themselves. We don't have that connection with the Europeans that we do with other Americans. On the national side of things, we have a stronger connection with the Black Americans than we do with the Europeans. Likewise, the Black Americans have more in common with us than they do the Africans. You say a majority of the blacks hate our guts. Did you go around and ask each and every black person if they hate our guts, or are you just presuming this? Are you just projecting your own hatred onto other people, dude? I'll wait for that answer. But I'll tell you, I suspect that you just are projecting on that one. Alright, so let's go further on. Where's this other portion right here? Because there's one or two other portions I wanted to respond to. Okay. So, I already gave you an example of what we need to nationalize, why we need to nationalize certain things, but I'm not going too deep into the free market argument. It's obvious that people abuse capitalism, and it makes our government more tyrannical. Our government are the businesses. Yes, people abuse capitalism. However, I think a lot of the abuse comes in more from them lobbying Congress to make laws that benefit them over everybody else. And I've told you the way to stop that is to stand up and say, Congress, is to stand up and say, hey, Congress, you don't have the authority to do this. Read the Constitution. And, quite frankly, we need more Supreme Court justices that actually read the text of the Constitution and strike down a lot of these regulations that have a book about this tall, for them, to where, the only people who can afford to operate legally are these mega corporations with a bunch of lawyers at their disposal. Nationalizing these industries aren't going to help anything. And that's how you actually get worse products. Before phone companies are a great example of this. Before we pretty much had our phone services nationalized, all we had was a landline and maybe voicemail and caller ID. After we let the free market take a hold of it, well, hell, who doesn't have a smartphone now with connection to the internet? That's an example of how things get so much better when you denationalize stuff and let the free market handle it. You get better technology developed out of it. And you said, again, as I say, you said you were a Second Amendment absolutist, but when you nationalize the weapons industry, yeah, I told you the problems with that. Somewhere along here you said that you didn't want to nationalize every private gunsmith, and I believe that was actually in the comments section. Well, here's the thing. When you're talking about selling firearms to government agencies, be it military or police, well, guess what? Sometimes civilians want that technology, but if you nationalize that, the technology isn't going to get much better. It's why, by the way, the Army Ordnance Corps is no longer allowed to make weapons for the armed services. They used to be allowed to, but then in the 50s and 60s, they showed us exactly why they shouldn't. U.S. soldiers going over their fighting wars for their country in general should have the best hardware they can have in their hands. I am against sending our soldiers off to war with substandard equipment. And that's what you're going to get when you nationalize the weapons industry. That would be one. But then second, yeah, you could have private gunsmiths, but again, as I say, sometimes people want decent quality weapons, and if you take government contracts away from companies that would market their weapons to government agencies, you take a lot of their business away, and you take a lot of their resources to develop better firearms away. Do you think we would have gotten a pistol like this HK Mark 23 had it not been for private companies competing to make a better pistol? Yes, this pistol right here was designed specifically for special operational forces. Now, they've developed a really good pistol, by the way. This is probably the heaviest tested pistol in the world. This design right here. And we wouldn't have gotten it had private companies not been competing for that. So, with that being said, yeah, I know not everybody can afford one. I know they don't make good sidearms. They're not being sidearms, but that is one such example. Glock, more common example. Guess what? They were originally designed as military pistols. Pistols for military and police. They are a decent pistol. Again, we wouldn't have pistols such as Glock if it weren't for private weapons companies competing for a government contract. So, there you have it. All right. So, moving on this page, Ben, you say, I'm guessing you're talking about people with serious mental disabilities when you say a class of people that hasn't done anything wrong but doesn't need a gun. Well, I looked through the video. I couldn't find the quote on what precisely I said, but I'm presuming I probably said something along the lines of, yeah, there are people who probably shouldn't have a gun, but, do anyway. These people are also the same type of people who probably shouldn't be driving a car. Okay, so with that being said, yeah, there are people who probably don't have any business with a firearm, a car, so on and so forth. Just because they don't have any, just because it's my opinion that they don't have any business with it, doesn't mean that we should pass laws to try to prohibit them from having these things. That's the only thing I can think of when you're talking about that. You say you would leave it up to their caretakers instead of violating the Second Amendment. I say don't violate the Second Amendment. That's just plain and simple. I don't know if you've watched a lot of my videos. I am pretty much in favor of the shall not be infringed approach. You go on to say that would also mean half the black race wouldn't be allowed to own a gun since they are, quote, legally retarded. Okay, dude, I'm going to need a citation for that. I'm very well aware that the IQ does not distribute equally through the various races and ethnicities through the country. I also don't buy into it near as extreme as you're making it out to be, nor do I buy into this idea it's specifically because of their race. But you go on to make this quip, I am sure since you are a civic nationalist, you would make an exception for them because, in an effort to deny the truth that equality is a lie. Okay, right there. You know what, dude? I think you know me better than this, and this is just something that's completely unfounded. You know what? I have gone on to say that yes, 52% of the violent offenders in this country happen to be black. I've never denied that there were any differences in the dispersion of things like crimes or IQ exist in the races. Yes, I'm very well aware that there are a different dispersion of numbers depending on which metric you're looking at, violent crime, IQ, anything like that. I also don't say, that it's because of race. I don't think that people should, simply because of their race, be treated differently. That's the point. And I've also said that, 52% of the violent offenders happen to be black. They happen to be black. I'm not fixated on their race. Who seems to be fixated on their race more than anybody else is the white nationalist, the ethno-nationalist like you, and the SJWs who would actually make that fucking exemption. So, there you go. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up here. Alright, for those of y'all who have watched this long, I appreciate y'all take her easy. Put your comments in there as well. I think so far the only other person that's commented on this aside from Chick Mick and his Jinx. Jinx, glad to hear you again on this one. Y'all take her easy out there and have a great day.